There was a time when certain grocery brands carried an almost mythical reputation. Shoppers didn't just buy them for flavor or convenience, they bought them because those labels suggested refinement, reliability, and even a touch of social status. Paying a premium felt justified, almost necessary, as if bringing those products home said something positive about your taste and success. But as the years passed, that emotional connection weakened. Today, many of those once celebrated names sit quietly on shelves, overlooked by customers who are more focused on price, practicality, and transparency. Some faded because they lost relevance. Others pushed their prices so high that everyday buyers drifted away, and a few simply failed to keep pace with changing expectations. Take, for example, a Dijon mustard that once behaved as though it belonged at a black tie gala rather than beside a rack of hamburger buns. For decades, this brand projected an image of European elegance. Its sturdy glass jars and polished labels made the standard yellow squeeze bottle look unsophisticated by comparison. American consumers were persuaded that true culinary refinement meant choosing imported French mustard. Even if it cost several times more than the generic alternative, it earned a reputation as the luxury car of condiments, though in reality it was often spread onto the same simple sandwiches found in any household fridge during the 80s and 90s. Owning a jar felt like a subtle badge of achievement. Advertising campaigns amplified that perception, featuring affluent characters in upscale settings who treated the mustard like a rare delicacy. The branding did much of the heavy lifting: thick glass packaging, restrained typography, and an overall air of exclusivity separated it visually from its more affordable competitors. It didn't just sell flavor, it sold aspiration. However, as younger consumers entered the market, that carefully constructed image lost its power. Many of them had never seen the classic commercials that framed the product as a marker of sophistication. Without that context, the brand looked like just another mustard, except noticeably more expensive. When placed next to store-brand Dijon options offering nearly identical taste at half the price, the premium became harder to justify. After all, once it's on a hot dog or mixed into a potato salad, distinguishing between luxury and standard can feel nearly impossible. Meanwhile, private label and specialty mustards expanded rapidly, providing comparable flavor profiles without the elevated cost. Shopping habits also evolved. Consumers began prioritizing value, authenticity, and ingredient transparency over perceived prestige. As a result, the once iconic mustard gradually shifted from pantry staple to occasional curiosity, interesting to spot, but no longer essential. A similar story unfolded in the beverage aisle, though for very different reasons. In the early 1980s, a California-based juice company burst onto the scene with vibrant bottles and ambitious health promises. Its drinks carried energetic names like Green Machine and Superfood, suggesting that ordinary juice was outdated and nutritionally inferior. The packaging radiated intensity, as though each bottle contained a carefully engineered blend of vegetables and supplements designed to supercharge the human body. The brand targeted health-conscious consumers who were willing to pay significantly more for beverages infused with vitamins, herbal extracts, and exotic produce. Its rapid growth attracted major attention, and in 2001 a global soda giant acquired the company for hundreds of millions of dollars, betting that the future of beverages would lean toward wellness rather than sugar-loaded sodas. But the company's polished health halo began to crack under pressure. Reports of contamination surfaced, directly contradicting the brand's carefully cultivated image of purity and vitality. For a business built on trust and the promise of superior nutrition, such issues proved especially damaging. As consumers grew more skeptical and more informed about what they were putting into their bodies, confidence eroded. What once seemed like the cutting edge of healthy living began to look like a cautionary tale about hype outpacing oversight. In both cases, the lesson is strikingly similar. Prestige and branding can propel a product to remarkable heights, but sustaining that success requires adapting to shifting values. When shoppers no longer equate price with quality, or when a brand's actions clash with its promises, loyalty can disappear faster than anyone expects. A string of product recalls dealt a heavy blow to the company's reputation. most notably a dangerous E. coli incident in the mid-1990s that hospitalized dozens of consumers. The situation created a jarring contrast between the brand's glowing promises and the reality inside its facilities. While advertisements painted its juices as pure, life-enhancing elixirs, reports revealed that harmful bacteria had slipped into the production process. For customers who had been paying top dollar for beverages marketed as fresh, raw, and wholesome, the news felt like a betrayal. The crisis exposed a deeper tension in the brand's identity. Its commitment to unpasteurized juice had been framed as a badge of authenticity, a sign that the drinks were closer to nature and therefore superior. But once safety concerns surfaced, many buyers began to question whether natural was simply another word for risky. The premium price tag no longer seemed justified if it came with potential health consequences. As competitors offering cold-pressed options with stronger safety assurances entered the scene, market share steadily slipped away. Eventually, the parent company decided the experiment had run its course. By 2020, the once trendy juice label was officially discontinued, ending the story of a business that had once claimed to capture wellness in every bottle. Another beverage from the past faced a very different struggle, staying relevant after its moment of cultural dominance faded. In the early 1990s, a sparkling water brand from Canada became a staple in American school cafeterias. Its distinctive teardrop-shaped glass bottles made ordinary bottled water look bland and uninspired. Teenagers embraced it not just for the flavored fizz, but for the image it projected. Carrying one felt like participating in a subtle style movement. Design played a huge role in its popularity. The uniquely curved bottle stood out instantly, giving the drink an almost collectible quality. Students would place them on lunch tables as if they were accessories rather than simple beverages. With vibrant flavors like wild cherry and packaging that seemed too elegant to discard, the brand positioned itself as a sophisticated alternative to soda. For a while, it succeeded brilliantly. But youth culture evolves quickly. By the early 2000s, the brand's once cutting-edge image had dulled. A wave of new sparkling water companies entered the market, offering updated branding, creative flavor combinations, and more affordable pricing. What had once felt sleek and modern began to appear outdated, less trendsetter, more relic. Eventually, operations ceased altogether. Years later, nostalgia breathed temporary life back into the label. A crowdfunding effort in 2015 generated enough enthusiasm to relaunch the product, demonstrating how powerful fond memories can be in driving consumer interest. Yet the comeback proved short-lived. The beverage aisle had become crowded with contemporary sparkling waters boasting convenient cans, broader flavor ranges, and competitive pricing. Despite its history, the revived brand struggled to carve out meaningful space in a market that had evolved beyond it. Meanwhile, a famous chef attempted to translate fine dining prestige into the canned soup category. Known for upscale restaurants and culinary innovation, he introduced a line of premium soups designed to deliver restaurant-level flavor straight from the pantry. The packaging was polished and elegant, immediately distinguishing itself from the familiar red and white cans that dominated grocery shelves. These products were clearly positioned as gourmet alternatives rather than everyday staples. The flavor profiles leaned heavily into sophistication: organic butternut squash, free-range chicken infused with herbs, and other combinations meant to signal refinement. Prices reflected that ambition, often landing at roughly twice the cost of conventional canned soups. The chef's name carried significant weight, lending instant credibility and attracting shoppers who associated him with culinary mastery. However, the initial excitement didn't automatically translate into lasting loyalty. Consumers soon discovered that branding and celebrity endorsement could only go so far. When it came down to taste, texture, and value, many questioned whether the elevated price truly delivered a noticeably superior experience. In a category built on affordability and convenience, convincing shoppers to pay a premium proved far more difficult than placing a famous signature on the label. Putting a celebrity chef's portrait on a soup label doesn't magically elevate what's inside the can. It's a bit like bolting spoilers onto a compact car and expecting it to perform like a race machine. The branding may suggest luxury, but the experience still has to deliver. In this case, Most shoppers found the soups perfectly acceptable, just not dramatically superior to the far less expensive options lined up beside them. The real challenge wasn't flavor so much as identity. Grocery store soup sections are typically divided into two clear camps. On one end are cost-conscious buyers scanning for discounts and multi-pack deals. On the other are customers seeking fresh, refrigerated, or homemade style soups that feel closer to restaurant quality. The celebrity-backed canned line ended up stranded between those two groups. Its price tag discouraged bargain hunters. Yet its shelf-stable format failed to impress shoppers looking for something artisanal or freshly prepared. With no clear audience, the brand drifted in a kind of retail limbo. Meanwhile, even established names in the dairy aisle were learning that recognition alone no longer secured customer devotion. Cracker Barrel cheese had built a strong image around aged cheddars and specialty varieties positioned above standard supermarket offerings. The products carried a higher price point and were presented as refined alternatives to basic sliced cheese. To complicate matters, many consumers mistakenly assumed a connection to the well-known restaurant chain of the same name. Even though the two businesses were entirely unrelated, that overlap created confusion, as shoppers tried to reconcile down-home dining with upscale cheese packaging. The cheese brand leaned heavily into a premium aesthetic. Dark, polished wrappers and bold typography were designed to signal craftsmanship and quality. Buyers were willing to pay extra, trusting that the sophisticated appearance and familiar name meant richer flavor and better texture than ordinary store brands. For years, this strategy paid off. The company occupied a comfortable middle ground, superior to mass-market cheese, yet still more accessible than imported European selections. However, the grocery landscape evolved. As supermarkets expanded their offerings, cheese sections transformed into showcases of global variety. Authentic imports from France, Italy, and the United Kingdom began appearing alongside small batch products from regional creameries. Suddenly, Cracker Barrel wasn't just competing with generic cheddar. It was up against specialists with centuries-old traditions and distinctive flavor profiles. In comparison, its premium positioning started to feel less convincing. At the same time, private label cheeses improved significantly in both taste and texture while maintaining lower prices. Budget-conscious shoppers noticed they could purchase comparable cheddar for a fraction of the cost. The brand found itself squeezed from both directions, higher-end cheeses outshining it on authenticity, and store brands undercutting it on value. In a crowded and increasingly sophisticated dairy aisle, defending its price became more difficult. European beverage labels encountered similar challenges as consumer preferences shifted. Perrier, the iconic sparkling mineral water from France, once symbolized continental sophistication in the United States. During the 1980s and 1990s, its slender green glass bottle became synonymous with elegance in restaurants and upscale homes. Choosing Perrier over tap water or soda felt like making a subtle cultural statement. Ordering it at dinner carried an unspoken message of refinement. The act of sipping sparkling mineral water from that distinctive bottle suggested worldly taste. Even for those who couldn't explain what made it special. It wasn't just hydration, it was performance. For a time, that image was powerful enough to keep the brand firmly planted at the top of the sparkling water hierarchy. But markets evolve, and what once symbolized sophistication can eventually blend into the background. As new sparkling water brands emerged with bold designs, creative flavors, and modern marketing campaigns, the once untouchable image of imported mineral water began to soften. Consumers who had once equated European origin with automatic superiority started exploring alternatives that felt fresher, trendier, and sometimes more affordable. Even icons of elegance must continually adapt, or risk becoming reminders of another era's definition of style. In its prime, Perrier virtually owned the American sparkling water category. Back then, many consumers saw carbonated water as little more than a bar ingredient, something you splashed into cocktails rather than drank on its own. Perrier reshaped that perception by presenting fizzy mineral water as a refined, health-forward substitute for sugary sodas. It appealed to people who wanted to project both wellness and sophistication at the same time. The brand's tall green glass bottles became more than packaging, they were subtle badges of taste. Hosts would place them on dining tables or conference room counters as understated signals of discernment. The allure of imported French mineral water, complete with its European heritage and elegant branding, persuaded buyers to spend significantly more on what was, fundamentally, sparkling water wrapped in a premium narrative. But the beverage landscape didn't stand still. The sparkling water section rapidly transformed into one of the most competitive areas in the store. New players entered with vibrant branding, fruit-infused varieties, and sleek aluminum cans designed to appeal to younger shoppers. Companies like LaCroix focused less on old-world prestige and more on bold flavors and contemporary aesthetics, while Perrier continued selling an image rooted in tradition and class. Competitors were busy offering drinks that delivered noticeable taste rather than subtle mineral notes. Shifting consumer priorities added further pressure. Environmental awareness grew, and shoppers began scrutinizing packaging choices and transportation impact. Importing heavy glass bottles across the Atlantic no longer seemed as charming when compared to locally produced options in lightweight, recyclable cans. For many buyers, sustainability and affordability started to outweigh legacy and reputation. In a market increasingly driven by flavor variety, eco-consciousness, and value, relying solely on heritage proved insufficient. Italian soda brands faced their own hurdles as preferences evolved. San Pellegrino's fruit sodas arrived in the United States with an unmistakable sense of flair. Slim cans capped with shiny foil lids turned opening a drink into a small ceremonial moment. Flavor names like aranciata and limonata sounded far more alluring than plain orange or lemon soda, reinforcing the sense that this was not an ordinary soft drink. The presentation played a crucial role. The foiled tops and refined can design made each purchase feel like a modest indulgence, even though the contents were essentially sweetened soda with an Italian accent. The branding emphasized craftsmanship, heritage, and small batch authenticity. Restaurants eagerly embraced the line because it allowed them to offer a non-alcoholic beverage that felt upscale and charge accordingly. For a time, the strategy worked beautifully. American consumers often associate Italy with culinary excellence, stylish design, and elevated taste, and the sodas benefited from that positive perception. Distinctive flavors such as blood orange and bitter lemon offered a refreshing departure from standard cola and lemon-lime options, attracting adventurous drinkers seeking something different. However, broader health trends began to undermine that appeal. As more people reduced their sugar intake, even elegantly packaged sodas lost their shine. Premium branding could not disguise the basic nutritional reality. Sugar remains sugar, no matter how sophisticated the label. Additionally, the smaller concisors that once felt chic and portion-controlled started to seem less practical when rival brands offered larger servings at comparable prices. Convenience, cost, and calorie awareness gradually overshadowed the romance of imported refinement, leaving these once coveted beverages navigating a far more demanding marketplace. Ironically, some of the features that once made San Pellegrino's fruit sodas feel refined gradually turned into disadvantages. The shiny foil seals, which initially added a sense of ceremony, became mildly inconvenient and contributed to additional packaging waste. As environmental awareness grew, many shoppers began favoring products with minimal, recyclable materials. At the same time, emerging beverage brands flooded shelves with broader flavor ranges, reduced sugar formulas, and packaging designed for quick, hassle-free use. In a retail environment increasingly shaped by wellness, affordability, and practicality, polished presentation by itself could no longer guarantee dominance. A similar shift unfolded in the frozen food aisle. Companies discovered that simply labeling a product organic was not enough to secure long-term loyalty. Amy's Kitchen began in 1987 as a small, family-operated venture with a clear and admirable purpose: produce organic frozen meals that tasted homemade rather than overly processed. During an era when many freezer dinners were packed with artificial additives and questionable ingredients, that mission resonated strongly. For years, Amy's stood apart. The brand felt like the thoughtful guest at a gathering who brought a carefully prepared dish instead of a last-minute grocery item. Health-focused shoppers embraced its vegetarian and organic offerings, grateful to see options aligned with their dietary preferences in mainstream supermarkets. Although the meals carried higher price tags than conventional frozen dinners, customers felt the premium reflected shared values, support for sustainable agriculture, recognizable ingredients, and balanced nutrition. The company carved out a niche among busy individuals who wanted convenience without compromising their principles. Over time, Amy's became almost synonymous with dependable, high-quality organic frozen meals. Many buyers were willing to spend extra for products free from artificial additives and filled with ingredients they could identify. However, as popularity grew, expectations shifted. Prices gradually increased, while portion sizes appeared to become smaller. By 2025, some entrees exceeded $7, putting them in the same range as certain casual dining options. For many shoppers, that comparison raised uncomfortable questions about value. Paying restaurant-level prices for a microwavable meal began to feel less justifiable. Customer reviews also began reflecting inconsistency. Reports of uneven seasoning, reduced portions, and occasional quality lapses chipped away at the brand's hard-earned trust. Meanwhile, competitors entered the organic frozen category with comparable offerings at noticeably lower costs. These alternatives demonstrated that nutritious, convenient meals did not have to carry such a steep premium. As a result, even loyal fans started reconsidering whether the brand still delivered enough to warrant its price. Pioneers in plant-based desserts experienced a different challenge: the difficulty of maintaining leadership after blazing the trail. Tofutti emerged decades ago as one of the first companies to recognize that individuals avoiding dairy still craved familiar indulgences like ice cream and cream cheese. In the 1980s, when soy milk was far from commonplace in American households, the company built frozen desserts and spreads from soy-based formulas. At a time when most consumers were unfamiliar with dairy-free alternatives, Tofutti's approach was groundbreaking. It was akin to sketching blueprints for an aircraft while the broader market was still skeptical about flight itself. The brand opened doors for plant-based innovation long before it became mainstream, laying foundational groundwork for an industry that would later expand dramatically. For close to 2 decades, the company held a commanding lead in the dairy-free dessert category largely because hardly anyone else was competing. Its ice cream sandwiches, frozen bars, and non-dairy treats became staples in health food shops and gradually appeared in select national grocery chains. For people who couldn't consume lactose or who followed vegan diets, these products felt like a breakthrough. Instead of settling for fruit sorbet or frozen juice pops, they finally had access to something that resembled the indulgent desserts everyone else enjoyed. As the years passed, the brand's name practically became synonymous with dairy-free sweets. Many consumers who were vegan, lactose intolerant, or simply experimenting with plant-based eating associated their very first creamy, non-dairy dessert experience with this company. The flavor and texture weren't flawless, but at the time, perfection wasn't the point. The products filled a gap that had previously been ignored. They addressed a genuine need in the marketplace when few other manufacturers showed interest. The real challenge emerged later. Rather than continuing to innovate, the company largely relied on its early mover advantage. Meanwhile, the plant-based industry evolved at a rapid pace. Almond milk, oat milk, and coconut milk surged in popularity, inspiring a wave of new dessert brands built on these alternative bases. These newer offerings delivered smoother textures and more authentic ice cream-like flavor profiles than soy-based formulas could typically achieve. While the original pioneer leaned on its legacy status, competitors focused on outperforming it. Established ice cream giants such as Ben & Jerry's entered the dairy-free segment with products designed to closely replicate the richness and mouthfeel of traditional ice cream. Suddenly, what once made the early brand distinctive, its soy foundation, became a competitive weakness. Shoppers discovered that desserts crafted from oat or almond bases often tasted creamier and less beany, shifting expectations across the entire category. The company that once defined dairy-free indulgence found itself struggling to keep pace in a market it had helped create. A similar pattern unfolded in the bottled water industry, where scientific branding initially drove massive growth. Smartwater entered an already crowded market with a compelling narrative. It promoted vapor distilled water enhanced with electrolytes, suggesting that this process delivered superior hydration compared to both tap water and standard bottled varieties. The marketing message implied that informed, performance-driven individuals chose this upgraded option to support their health and productivity. The branding strategy was highly effective. For a time, ordinary water began to seem outdated, almost simplistic, compared to a product presented as technologically refined. The sleek, elongated bottles and minimalist labels reinforced the image of precision and purity. The company, founded by Glasseo, emphasized its distillation process, which removed impurities before reintroducing select minerals for improved taste and balance. Recognizing the brand's momentum, Coca-Cola acquired Glasseo in 2007 for approximately $4 billion, one of the largest deals in the bottled water sector. Celebrity endorsements throughout the late 2000s amplified the product's appeal. Actors and athletes appeared in advertising campaigns that subtly linked their success and vitality to enhanced hydration, blending science with star power. However, public perception gradually evolved. Growing environmental awareness prompted consumers to reconsider the environmental impact of single-use plastic bottles. Many began questioning why they were paying a premium for packaged water when municipal tap supplies in numerous areas met rigorous safety standards. Studies and consumer reports indicated that, in many cases, bottled water provided little measurable benefit over filtered tap water. As these insights spread, the justification for spending extra on enhanced hydration became less convincing, particularly among shoppers increasingly focused on sustainability and value. The shift in public opinion proved particularly damaging for Smartwater because its primary customers were often the very people most concerned about wellness and environmental responsibility. As awareness around plastic pollution intensified, many consumers began to see a contradiction between prioritizing personal health and purchasing single-use bottled water. Refillable metal and glass bottles became everyday essentials, doubling as fashion statements and symbols of eco-conscious living. At the same time, household filtration systems offered a practical alternative, delivering clean drinking water without generating piles of discarded plastic. No matter how much the brand emphasized added electrolytes or advanced purification methods, it struggled to overcome mounting concerns about sustainability and waste. A comparable lesson unfolded in the breakfast aisle, where brands discovered that nutritional claims alone cannot guarantee repeat purchases. Vans Waffles entered the frozen food market with a well-meaning mission: provide whole-grain breakfast options at a time when many competitors relied heavily on sugar and artificial ingredients. The company positioned itself as a more responsible alternative for busy households seeking convenience without sacrificing health. Early on, this approach resonated, as interest in whole grains and gluten-free diets grew during the 2000s. Vans expanded its offerings to include multiple varieties catering to different dietary needs. Parents appreciated seeing ingredient lists that highlighted fiber content, reduced sugar levels, and whole grain flour, compared to brightly colored boxes promoting cartoon characters and syrup-drenched indulgence. Vans' packaging suggested maturity and thoughtful nutrition. On a practical level, the brand appeared to deliver exactly what many families claimed to want: a healthier shortcut to breakfast. However, enthusiasm waned when taste entered the equation. By focusing so intensely on nutritional improvements, the company overlooked the importance of flavor and texture. Consumers frequently described the waffles as dry and uninspiring, with a consistency closer to cardboard than a comforting morning treat. While the nutritional profile looked impressive, the eating experience often felt more obligatory than enjoyable. Children, in particular, were not persuaded by fiber counts or reduced sugar claims. Many resisted the product outright, leaving parents torn between serving something deemed healthier and ensuring breakfast didn't turn into a daily battle. As competition increased, rival brands introduced protein-enriched waffles that combined better flavor with improved nutritional profiles. These alternatives demonstrated that it was possible to balance health benefits with satisfying taste. Ultimately, Vans learned that good intentions and wholesome ingredients cannot compensate for a product that fails to delight the palate. Protein snack bars faced similar scrutiny. Kellogg's launched Special K protein bars as an extension of its long-established cereal brand. targeting women interested in convenient snacks aligned with fitness goals and weight management. The bars were marketed as containing meaningful amounts of protein and fiber, coated in chocolate to make mindful eating feel indulgent rather than restrictive. Advertising emphasized balance, satisfying cravings while supporting an active lifestyle. Yet in an increasingly informed marketplace, consumers began examining nutrition labels more closely. Shoppers compared protein content, sugar levels, and ingredient lists across brands. As expectations rose, simply labeling a product, protein, was no longer enough. Buyers demanded substantial nutritional value and cleaner formulations. In a crowded category filled with specialized fitness brands and transparent ingredient sourcing, mainstream offerings had to prove they delivered more than clever marketing. The advertising didn't just position the bars as convenient snacks, it hinted that each wrapper contained the wisdom of a dietitian and the discipline of a personal trainer. Buying one felt, at least in theory, like making a strategic health decision rather than simply grabbing something sweet. This approach blended seamlessly into Special K's broader messaging, which had long centered on moderation, mindful portions, and encouraging women to feel confident about their food choices. For people rushing between work, errands, and family responsibilities, the bars appeared to offer a practical shortcut, something quick that still aligned with wellness goals. Because the Special K name had been associated with health-oriented cereals for years, consumers were inclined to trust the extension into protein snacks. Many believed they had found a treat that could tame chocolate cravings without derailing progress. The packaging, branding, and claims all suggested balance. Indulgence without guilt. Sweetness paired with substance. On the surface, it seemed like the ideal compromise for busy, health-aware shoppers. That perception began to unravel once nutritionists and consumer advocates took a closer look at the ingredient lists. Despite the wholesome branding, the bars often contained higher sugar levels than buyers expected, along with processed components that felt inconsistent with the better choice image. For some customers, reading the fine print was like discovering that a supposedly clean-eating role model had a hidden stash of junk food. The disconnect between messaging and formulation weakened the trust that had initially driven sales. Compounding the issue, the company faced legal scrutiny over claims that regulators deemed misleading. Lawsuits and mandated changes to advertising language further chipped away at credibility. Meanwhile, a new generation of protein bar brands emerged, emphasizing shorter ingredient lists, natural sweeteners, and transparent labeling. Compared to these newer competitors, Special K's offerings began to seem overly processed and less aligned with evolving consumer expectations. In a category where shoppers increasingly scrutinized macros and sourcing, reputation alone was no longer enough. A similar pattern played out in the plant-based meat industry. Boca Burgers had been a trailblazer since the late 1970s. Long before alternative proteins became mainstream conversation. Built primarily around soy-based patties, the brand provided vegetarians with one of the first widely available substitutes for traditional hamburgers. At a time when meatless options were scarce, Boca effectively defined the category it helped create. In its early years, the product felt groundbreaking, like introducing the first practical vehicle in a world accustomed to walking. For decades, the company maintained leadership largely because meaningful competition was minimal. Its frozen patties became reliable staples in supermarkets, offering convenient, protein-rich meals for households seeking meat-free solutions. The brand earned loyalty by delivering consistency, affordability, and ease of preparation. However, the landscape shifted dramatically around 2018. Advances in food science ushered in a new wave of plant-based meat innovators determined not just to replace meat, but to replicate it convincingly. These companies used pea protein, sophisticated flavor chemistry, and novel processing techniques to mimic the texture, juiciness, and even visual appearance of beef. Suddenly, the soy patties that once felt revolutionary began to seem simplistic by comparison. As consumer expectations rose, being the original innovator mattered less than delivering the most realistic and satisfying experience. While Boca continued promoting its patties as proudly plant-based, rival companies shifted the conversation entirely. Instead of simply highlighting that their burgers were made from vegetables, They used food science to transform those vegetables into products that looked, smelled, and even bled like real beef. The standard that Boca had once set, being a dependable meat-free option, suddenly seemed outdated. Consumers were no longer satisfied with a soy patty that tasted like grains and seasoning. They wanted something that could genuinely pass for a traditional burger. As brands built around pea protein, wheat gluten, and other innovative blends entered the scene, the gap became obvious. These newcomers delivered juicier textures and richer flavors that more closely resembled the real thing. In comparison, Boca's longtime soy formula began to feel basic and less satisfying. Unfortunately, just as the category experienced explosive growth and creativity, Boca's parent company appeared slow to adapt. In a market racing forward, hesitation proved costly. Being first had secured early dominance. But without meaningful reinvention, that early lead quickly eroded. Established cookie brands were facing their own challenges, especially as shoppers grew more price-sensitive. Pepperidge Farm cookies once symbolized a touch of elegance in the packaged dessert aisle. Varieties like Milano and Chessman carried a certain refinement, making generic store-brand cookies seem plain by comparison. The brand leaned into European-inspired recipes and upscale presentation, convincing customers that these treats offered bakery-level quality straight from a box. At their height in the early 2000s, Pepperidge Farm cookies were often reserved for special occasions. Families brought them out during holidays, dinner gatherings, or moments when they wanted to impress guests. The packaging felt polished and mature, almost formal, giving the brand an aura of sophistication. That premium positioning allowed the company to charge higher prices while reinforcing the idea that quality justified the cost. However, the competitive landscape shifted. Supermarkets expanded their in-house bakery sections, and smaller artisan cookie brands began capturing attention with fresher, more creative offerings. At the same time, private label versions of sandwich and shortbread cookies appeared on shelves at significantly lower prices. Many of these alternatives delivered similar flavors and textures, making it harder for Pepperidge Farm to defend its shrinking portion sizes and higher price points. As shoppers weighed cost against experience, the brand's once clear advantage became less obvious. Organic food companies encountered similar pressure. Annie's began as a modest, independent brand built around a simple yet powerful promise: offer familiar comfort foods made with organic ingredients. Its macaroni and cheese, prepared with real cheese instead of artificial powders, stood out in a market saturated with brightly colored, highly processed children's meals. Parents eager for healthier alternatives quickly embraced the cheerful bunny mascot as a reassuring symbol. The brand cultivated a reputation for balancing nutrition with kid-friendly appeal. Annie's products felt wholesome without being overly preachy. For families seeking cleaner ingredient lists but still wanting convenience, it was an appealing compromise. The smiling bunny logo became shorthand for trust, signaling that the food inside aligned with values around sustainability and quality. Over time, Annie's expanded beyond its flagship mac and cheese into crackers, fruit snacks, and other pantry staples designed for children. Each new product aimed to provide an organic twist on familiar favorites, reinforcing the idea that better ingredients did not have to mean sacrificing taste. Yet as the organic category grew and more competitors entered with comparable options, the brand faced the same fundamental test as others before it: maintaining value and differentiation in a marketplace that no longer lacked alternatives. For years, many moms and dads were proud to put Annie's products into their shopping carts. The company appeared to represent thoughtful nutrition, responsible sourcing, and a philosophy that matched the way these families hoped to feed their children. Its branding painted a picture of a small, caring business that prioritized ingredient quality and ethical farming over squeezing out maximum profit. Compared to massive multinational food corporations, Annie's felt approachable and principled, almost like a neighbor who genuinely cared about what ended up on kids' plates. That image shifted dramatically in 2014 when General Mills purchased the brand for $820 million. While the move made sense from a business perspective, expanding distribution and resources, it unsettled many loyal customers. To them, it felt similar to seeing a cherished local cafe replaced by a national franchise. The product might still be available, perhaps even more widely than before, but the sense of independence and authenticity seemed diminished. The emotional connection that had once set Annie's apart grew more complicated. Soon after, pricing became a growing concern. Annie's items consistently cost more than competing organic store brands that began appearing in greater numbers. As supermarket private labels improved their ingredient quality and expanded their organic lines, families started comparing labels more closely. Many discovered they could purchase comparable macaroni, crackers, or snacks with similar certifications at a lower price. Once shoppers realized they had alternatives that met their standards without the premium markup, loyalty weakened. Gradually, the cheerful bunny mascot that once signaled trust and wholesome values began to feel less like a guarantee of superior quality and more like polished branding attached to a higher price tag. Parents who had once felt emotionally invested in the company grew more pragmatic. In an era where information is readily available and choices are abundant, sentiment alone rarely outweighs cost and convenience. Taken together, these stories highlight a broader lesson in the food industry. Premium positioning and heartfelt branding can elevate a company for years, but consumer preferences are never static. Shoppers evolve, competitors improve, and transparency increases. Without consistent innovation, meaningful differentiation, and pricing that feels justified, even beloved brands can lose their edge. Staying relevant requires more than a strong origin story. It demands ongoing proof that the product truly delivers value in a rapidly changing marketplace.